Christian parenting.
It's also true that very few adults understand what open adoption is. Like we said earlier, they think it's co-parenting, or they get it confused with foster care, which is another misconception.
Right. Yes.
So if we just get educated so that we're in a position to talk to that 1 in 4, that would be a really nice. I'd love to see the whole adult community step into that call to action.
Hey, welcome back, sweet families, to the Call to Love podcast. As always, I am so grateful that you have chosen to spend the next few moments with us as we dive into all things practical, clinical, and always, most importantly, the biblical aspects of the foster care and adoption callings. Hey, full disclosure, as we're getting started today, it is the spring and the lovely allergens and pollens have decided to camp out in my sinuses. And so if I'm sounding a little interesting on today's episode, I'm going to apologize in advance for that. But I did not want to delay any longer this incredible conversation that we have in store for you as we are talking about adoption education and just leaning into more of the experts that we have right here in our country who are doing incredible work to promote the beautiful calling specifically related to adoption. So joining me today for this conversation is Terri Marcroft. She is an adoptive mother, author, and the executive director of an organization called Unplanned Good that she is going to share with us all about. Terri, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Summer.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. You are just delightful and you have so much work that is just amazing when it comes to the adoption space. And this listening audience, we're just trying to educate ourselves more and more in all of the different aspects. And so that's why I'm really excited to lean into your experience and expertise. But let's begin by having you tell us a little bit about your family and just the work that you do through Unplanned Good.
Okay, sure. My family, I have only one daughter, and she was placed with us by a teenage birth mother who chose adoption when she was still in school and still in her late teens. And so we were incredibly blessed from that moment in our adoption. And that was 25 years ago. And so I didn't realize at the time that she chose my husband and me to be the parents of her baby. I did not realize how rare that was and how incredibly unusual it is for a young woman of that age to choose adoption.
Right.
And so we just took each blessing as it came, and we might have even taken it a little bit for granted, but it was more in hindsight over, getting home and then starting to raise our girl that I realized, because a lot of my friends started facing infertility and they were not able to adopt. Then I started looking into, well, why is that? Because there are so many unplanned pregnancies. Why would it be difficult?
Right.
I naively asked myself. So then I found out that it's less than 1% of the women who face unplanned pregnancy who choose adoption. And I thought, that's got to change, because we just had the most beautiful experience that it completed our family. It left her more or less whole after that very, very difficult decision and journey to place.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it was easy at all, but it certainly turned out better than possibly the alternatives could have, in
Right.
my opinion. And so that's when I decided I had to start spreading the word. And I very much felt that God called me to incorporate Unplanned Good, form a nonprofit, and start preaching from the mountaintops about how beautiful adoption could be.
That's so fantastic. I love that. And you have had incredible success. Matter of fact, a lot of legislation and things on the state level that have been very,
Mhm.
very successful. Share with us a little bit about the work that Unplanned Good has been able to achieve.
Well, so for the first 15 years of running Unplanned Good, it was a couple of hours a month that I put into the whole thing, because I was busy running my business, raising my daughter, taking care of my home, doing my job. It was only a couple hours a month. But then in 2022, everything changed when Roe got overturned.
Right.
Not by coincidence. What do you call that when it's a God coincidence, a God based coincidence? Roe got overturned. My daughter had just graduated college and found a job that she really loved, and she became financially independent. She was happy in her life, and that felt to me like permission to go do whatever I wanted and
Yeah.
dive in full time. So I dove into the Unplanned Good work like never before, and my 2 hours a month went to 45 hours a month. just
Wow.
overnight almost. And that's when I started writing books about adoption. And I came here to Boise and was introduced by a college friend. I was introduced to the lieutenant governor in the legislature here, and that's Lieutenant Governor Scott Bedke, who was very receptive and very insightful in our very first conversation. And he said, "You know, we just pretty much banned abortion in this state, and so it makes perfect sense that we would start talking more about adoption."
Yeah.
And so he introduced me to Senator Julie Van Orden, who happened to be chair of the Health and Welfare Committee in the Senate. And we teamed up and we started getting busy on legislation. So I've been here in Boise now through two legislative sessions, and those have been a ton of work, but also very gratifying because we got three bills passed last year's session and three bills passed this year's session. But the whole idea is making adoption more visible, better understood, and then making that journey a little bit easier on the birth mother because it is truly hard. It's a hard choice to make.
Absolutely. It certainly is, and I appreciate you saying that, and we certainly want to give honor to that. And as we have this conversation today, you and I both, as adoptive mothers,
Hmm.
have that relationship with our daughter's birth mothers, and
Hmm.
that is something that we want to honor as such an incredible, sacrificial, beautiful choice to make, and what a gift it has been to all of our families involved. And so, for those of you who might be considering this adoption calling, I think this is a really healthy conversation just to lean into as we talk about where our birth mothers begin in making these decisions. And that starts with education, which is the work that you're
Hmm.
doing, Terri. And so you mentioned 1% making that plan. That is such a sobering number, I think, when you think, because
Hmm.
in the adoption world, we're like, everybody knows about adoption, but they really don't. Talk to us
Hmm.
a little bit more about that.
People don't know about adoption because, like in my family, the family that I grew up in, we had never talked about adoption. We had no ties to adoption. It was never a dinner table conversation. It was just not on our radar. And yet, all six of my siblings had kids by the time I got married. So it was surprising to me that we were dealing with infertility. But adoption
Mm.
has changed very much. So back in the days when I was in high school, it was often the pregnant woman's parents who sent her off to a relative and said, "You will place this baby for adoption, and then you can come back to town after
Right.
that's done." So she didn't have any choices.
Yeah.
And she also didn't have any information after the
Mm,
placement, which
right.
is devastating to go through the pregnancy and then place your baby with another couple, to not even know who that couple is,
Yeah.
to have no say in which couple is chosen to parent
Right.
your child. All of that is just extremely traumatic. So today, the difference is in open adoption situations today, which is the standard, the woman who's choosing adoption of her own free will because she loves her child so much that she wants her child to have all of the benefits of a two parent family, a stable household, maybe or maybe not having other kids in the house, whatever she decides. But all of those decisions are up to her. That's the number one thing that has changed, is that she's in the driver's seat now.
Right.
She's not being pushed around. And so she gets to make these decisions, and she can choose age, race, religion, careers, location. She can choose all of these things. And so making those decisions herself is a very much healthier start. And then being able to stay in touch after the placement. This is
Yeah.
the key to open adoption, is the transparency. And
Yes.
that's good for everybody involved for a whole lot of different reasons.
It is. Yeah, and if you'll lean into that a little bit for us more, you had shared that you have a very open relationship with your daughter's biological mother. Talk about the blessing that that's been, because honestly, that I think is a fear for a lot of potential adoptive parents. I can
Ah.
speak for myself that that was true as well. We don't see it necessarily as a joining of two families. It's very much a separate type of an event in our minds, where we take the child and we assume life, and that's
Mhm.
not the case. We are forever joining two families as we share this beautiful life. And so lean into just maybe some insights that you've had from the experience of navigating open adoption.
Yes, it does sound like a scary concept to people when they first learn about open adoption. And some people jump to the conclusion that it's co-parenting, which it definitely is not co-parenting,
Mm,
because the adoptive parents are the parents, no two ways about it. But the benefit of keeping in touch with the birth mother or the birth parents, in some cases that's possible, where the birth father might be involved. The benefit of keeping in touch with the birth mom uh, is a huge benefit to everybody involved. For the child, if you want to start with a child centric perspective, which is a good idea in most of this, the child gets answers, and so that's the most important thing. Because if
yeah.
the child gets answers and know that his or her birth mom chose adoption out of love and out of wanting something better, it means that that child cannot assume that they did something wrong and feel guilty, because kids will assume that something's their fault if they don't get a better answer.
Yes.
And so if they get the answer and they realize what the birth mother went through in order to place them in a beautiful, healthy, nurturing, stable family, and that she went through a really difficult journey in order to do it, there's a better chance that that child can feel the love that his or her birth mom, you know, experienced and was motivated to choose adoption. So that child getting answers, that's one of the biggest benefits of the open adoption. But even for the adoptive parents, why they should not even be afraid of this, because when the birth mother goes through that very, very difficult journey, like imagine climbing a huge mountain and then getting to the top, and you're not going to undo that. They're not going to go back and later say, actually, just kidding, changed my mind. That's just that wouldn't happen. And so the birth parents go through such a difficult time in order to make that plan. They
Yep.
have a lot of time to think about it. They're signing a ton of paperwork. They have some waiting period also to make sure that they're doing the right thing for themselves. They usually, hopefully, get some counseling and some therapy along the way as well, to make sure that they're considering the ramifications of their decision. So
Right.
all of that helps for the birth parents to be sure about what they're doing. And as a consequence, the adoptive parents can rest assured that this is going to be permanent. But also for the adoptive parents to have that information, like they get medical history, for example. That's a
Yeah.
great thing for the adoptive parents to know. you
Yes.
know if you have a lactose intolerance, if you have a tendency towards diabetes in your family, like a thousand different possibilities for
Right.
needing medical information. So all
Yeah.
of that information is just good to have, in the spirit of transparency and equipping people to be good parents.
Hey, friends, I can hardly believe it, but graduation, Mother's Day, and Father's Day are quickly coming. And if you're anything like me, you're searching for the perfect gift to celebrate each one of these special people and occasions in your life. So that's why I'm excited to tell you about the Christian Parenting Moms, Dads, and Grads gift guide that has something for everyone. Whether you're honoring a new mom, a seasoned dad, or a recent grad, Christian Parenting has you covered with thoughtful and meaningful gift ideas. Inside this gift guide, you will find some of our favorite resources, from Bibles and study tools to inspiring books, fun projects, and even some special bath products. And you're guaranteed to find something special for the most important people on your gift list this spring. You can visit christianparenting.org/gift guide to get your moms, dads, and grads a gift guide today. And the link is also provided in today's show notes. Now let's get back to the conversation. Yes, I agree. And I think, and I hope I'm not speaking this out of ignorance, but I do believe in everything that you just said. And I agree with it, because so much of you're talking about having answers and that just giving more
Mm-hmm.
stability to everybody involved in their
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And one of the ongoing struggles that we do see oftentimes with our kiddos who don't have answers is identity crises,
Mm-hmm.
because of that lack of information. And so
Mm-hmm.
it is a gift not only for a biological parent to choose life, and then if they cannot successfully parent, to choose a family that they feel confident in placing that child with, and then choose to allow that information for that child. So it is just giving after giving after giving. But you made a great
Mm-hmm.
point, Terry. I think it is important for us to note, the amount of work and input that it requires on both sides of the story before an
Mhm.
adoption is completed. The what we as adoptive parents go through in terms of, like you're saying, the paperwork, the education, all of the requirements, all the things that we have to bring to the table. And then on the flip side, the hard work that is done with the biological family and making that tough decision. And so you're
Mhm.
bringing so much work and effort to the table when that gavel is finally let down and, an
Mhm.
adoption is finalized, and how much, that to me just communicates so much love
Yes.
rather than, this message of, well, you weren't wanted, and a lot of times the lies that are spoken around this
Mhm.
adoption conversation, right, Terry?
Right, right. There used to be a lot more propensity to lie because there was a social stigma about or surrounding adoption all the way. And so, but that's as it should be. The adults should be doing the work, both the birth parents and the adoptive parents. It's our job to do the work for the sake of the child. And so that's kind of, I think that's like the big picture of God's plan anyway.
Yes. Oh, I would agree, and I'm
Mhm.
curious just in your advice as we're talking about kind of putting in that work, there is for our listeners who are wrestling with this calling of adoption, whether or not they're gonna step into the work that we're talking about today,
Mhm.
what encouragement or insight would you offer just as they begin to prepare their hearts to go on this journey and to even consider what it's like to have this ongoing relationship with biological family, all the things maybe they haven't thought of yet related to adoption?
If it's struggling, if their struggle is in whether or not to keep that connection with the biological family, for them, I mean, obviously praying about such things is helpful and healthy, but I would just encourage them to keep the child at the center of your considerations.
Hmm.
Because if it's child centric and you really want to do what's best for your child, you'll see the beauty and the rationale behind open adoption.
Yeah.
So it might scare us a little bit as adults, but that's only our insecurities speaking. But be assured that child knows who mom is and knows who dad is. The adoptive parents can be secure in knowing that the child, feels comfortable. You're raising him. You're the one who gets up in the middle of the night when there's a temperature or whatever else is going on.
Yeah.
So, like, I can't remember ever that my daughter was confused about that.
Hmm. That's
Just
amazing.
doesn't hardly happen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good word. I think, we need to talk about these things because it
Hmm.
is a very vulnerable experience on
Hmm.
in every aspect. And so talking about just having those conversations, I think there is a lot of emphasis on how we approach the conversation related to our mothers who are making that decision of whether or not to parent, whether or not to choose adoption. It can
Hmm.
be very difficult for those who are just longing for a child, longing to add to our families, to not fall into conversations that might put pressure on a mother. And so what are some what's some advice that you might give us just in terms of having conversations if you've been introduced to maybe a young mother who's contemplating, maybe there's someone in your family that is contemplating that conversation? What are ways that we as the potential adoptive parents can be encouraging, uplifting, pointing them to their freedom of choice, and leaning into God's will to parent their child?
Yeah. Well, you're talking about if we're in a position to speak into the life of the woman facing the unplanned pregnancy. So if she
Right.
got surprised by a pregnancy, I think the best thing that we can do is to just take a breath and step back and look at the big picture. Help her look at the big picture. Because there's a tendency, especially in our society today, there's a tendency to want to solve problems right now. Like,
Yeah.
fix this by this weekend, or make a decision by this weekend,
Right.
and to just step back and say, "Hey, so let's take some time to really understand all the options on the table and get full information, read up about who's chosen what, how do they feel a few years later, and really encourage the big picture view." Out of all of the birth moms that I've spoken to who chose adoption, when they look back on the year of choosing adoption and making their placement, making their plan and making their placement, when they look back on that with some distance, they see that typically they describe that as the most difficult year of their lives and yet the most beautiful year of their lives,
Oh, wow.
where they really would not even change a thing, many of them. You
Right.
can't speak for everybody, but
Sure.
it's really in hindsight to know that you've actually chosen parents for your baby and then created a new family. That's almost mind blowing to wrap your mind around that. That a 17 or 18-year-old young woman has the power to create a family.
Yeah.
And uh, that's just, it's a perspective thing. So that's what
Mhm.
I would say. In answer to your question, I'd say just to look at some perspective, and which is big picture, which is taking a step back and a breath to think it through.
Mm.
And so, like, don't be tempted to solve problems in the next couple days.
Yes, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, decisions made out of reaction often do bring regret, and so I think
Hmm.
that's definitely wisdom for sure.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's become your mission. You are traveling all over the country and you are advocating for more education because I think that
Yes.
the last statistic I read, there was something like more than 2 million families who are waiting for and hoping for successful adoption.
Uh-huh.
And then you talk about only 1% of unplanned pregnancies going towards adoption. And so the math doesn't match there.
It does.
Obviously, in a
Right.
perfect world, we want to meet that need with the other. And so lean into, like, I think you said today,
Right.
you're even traveling to California as we speak. And
Yeah.
so to create more awareness in all of this, how are you educating people and how is that being received?
Well, so just knowing those numbers is a good first step. To realize that the 1% is out of almost 3 million women a year in this country who are facing unplanned pregnancy.
Wow.
So if you said 3 million women, that would be that would be 30,000 babies if it was 1%. But we know that there aren't even 20,000. So it's less than 1% of the 3 million who become infant adoption, placement plans. And so educating about those numbers, and so sort of seeing the magnitude of that almost 3 million unplanned pregnancies, that's quite a huge number. And then when you bring it down to our own community, one in four teenagers faces unplanned pregnancy by the time they're 20. So if one in four teenagers is getting pregnant by 20, that means it's in your neighborhood, it's in your community, it's in your church or in your school or in your family. It could be your niece or your student in class. It could be your best friend's daughter, your best friend's niece. It's all over if it's one in four students there, or one in
Right.
four teenagers that are getting pregnant. So
Right.
that's a call to action for all of us to be ready to talk about adoption.
Yes.
And it's also true that very few adults understand what open adoption is. Like we said earlier, they think it's co-parenting, or they get it confused with foster care, which is another misconception.
Right. Yes.
So if we just get educated so that we're in a position to talk to that one in four, that would be a really nice. I'd love to see the whole adult community step into that call to action.
You bet. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Well, and I'm thinking probably several years ago when I was in the prospective adoptive parent season of my life, I would be hearing these numbers and I would be so frustrated and thinking, but I'm doing everything. I'm talking to these attorneys, I'm talking to agencies, I've signed up, we've paid the fees, we did, and nothing. We're
Hmm.
waiting. And some of that, obviously, as I've talked about many times on the show, comes down to God's sovereignty. But are there other action steps that you would advise prospective adoptive parents to take to create that awareness, even in their own communities, that they are available and interested in becoming adoptive parents?
Well, yeah. So talking to those in your circle and in your community, that is a good first step. The crisis pregnancy centers or the Christian pregnancy centers in your community can always use extra volunteers. They need people to either arrange for the baby store that they have, like donate onesies and diapers and formula and all of that, because they're often trying to be supportive in the first few months of life. So you can connect with your local pregnancy center and see what their current needs are and just offer to help in that way. And then get into the habit of talking about adoption and helping people to open their minds to that option, because they'll actually think that it's a choice between abortion and parenting. Most people think that.
Yeah.
And that's why it's less than 1% who choose adoption, because most people are thinking you need to either abort or parent.
Yeah.
But so many women would be willing to choose life for their baby if they knew that they didn't have to parent for the next 20 years.
Mm.
That's a big realization. Like, oh, I can complete the pregnancy and not have to parent for the next 20 years. That's a relief, actually.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
an encouragement to choose life. So just if we change our language and incorporate some of those thoughts and stop talking about giving up, get her to give up her baby. That
Right.
phrase almost sends chills down my spine whenever I hear it because
Yeah.
we're not giving up anymore, not with open adoption.
Right. No, I think that's
Yeah.
a really great point, and it does to know that we are of the mindset now and that the culture shift has happened in such a way that we are seeing the biological parent, and it is a blessing to all for them to be able to choose life, for a child to be placed in a loving and caring home, for the mother, the
Hmm.
biological mother, to feel supported and to
Hmm.
feel that relief, but to still have the involvement with their child through the
Uh-huh.
course of their life. I mean, that really is a beautiful option, and we are just prayerful that more people will be more educated and will take more action steps to share that and to serve. I love that you talk about serving, because we don't want to just sit back and say we want to adopt your babies. Like we really do want to see the women who are walking in these different situations and to serve them, and to I can speak for our own situation. Our daughter's biological mother, she was going on to improve her education and her choices for her career, and she was excited about that, and she was grateful for the choices that she was being given, and I'm grateful to be able to carry that joy along with her. And so
Hmm.
there doesn't always have to be this negative connotation, kind of like what you're talking about, Terry. So I think that's really, really
Yeah.
important for us to be able to highlight today.
Yeah. And then by chance, if anyone knows a woman who has chosen adoption for her baby, there are so many opportunities to serve her, to take her to lunch or to give her a gift card or, any number of things that you can do just to put a smile on her face and encourage her and say, hey, babe, you did a good thing. Good for
Yes.
you.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a really great word of encouragement. Terry, I'm so grateful for the work that you do and just how the Lord has grown your influence through Unplanned Good. And I want to make sure that our listeners can learn more from you and connect with you. So, how would you point them in your direction to learn more?
I'd love for people to check out our website. It's unplannedgood.org. And there you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, which keeps everybody updated on our legislation that passes or whatever else we're doing, speaking engagements. And then two books are available on Amazon. One is called Pro Choice, Pro Adoption, and that's written mainly for pro choice people so that they can learn about the beauty of adoption
Mm.
and not just default towards abortion. And the second book is called Pro Family, Pro Adoption, and that's a Christian's guide to evaluating all those unplanned pregnancy options.
Amazing. Okay, listeners, I will have those links in today's show notes. And friends, I know you're going to want to check that out. And just pray for Terry as she continues in her work to continue to educate others across the country related to adoption. Obviously, that's something that's near and dear to our hearts here at Call to Love. And so I'm just grateful for you taking the time to share about the work that he has you doing. And we just pray your continued success in that. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Summer.
Thank you so much for listening to Called to Love today. I love to hear from listeners, and so I would love to connect with you to hear your stories and answer your questions right here on the show. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram, send me a direct message, or send me an email at the link in today's show notes. I pray you have been encouraged by today's episode to walk in faith and continue to embrace your own call to love. Until next time, blessings, sweet friends.